We have to take this last sutra from the previous paragraph, Ketu.
Yes, from
Left
this one.
there. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. We are live now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Talk 42 of our reading of The Purpose of Birth and Death by Shri Tavaria. We'll start from page number 170 through 173, second paragraph. Alka, over to you.
Sutra 4, Book 4, verse 16. The many modifications of the one mind produce the diverse forms which depend for their existence upon those man-made impulses.
Okay. I've not had time actually to see these sutras, so we'll keep them for next time, but we'll just go through what he's saying today. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. As biological development proceeds, slowly the mind and thinking instrument come to the above conviction and thence proceed to the following conclusions. Book 4, verse 19.
This is very important that uh, there is psychological development and there is biological development. When we are working psychologically, right, to observe our reactions and rise to a higher state of being to change the structure, what he says, then it is a psychological development. But if you were to leave it to nature, then there would be in nature, there is biological evolution. So we can see that in the last 100 years, the brain has biologically evolved very, very fast. Right? So if we were to leave it to biological evolution, then it would take many, many cycles for us to reach the same psychological state. Right? But because psychological evolution can proceed independent of biological evolution, right? So, uh, right? So that is possible.
Book 4, verse 19. Because it can be seen or cognized, it is apparent that the mind is not the source of illumination.
Right. So because we can see our reactions in the mind, because we can see our feelings, we can see our thoughts, we can see our sensations, right? So where does the, what do you call, uh, the light for knowing come? Because all knowing needs some light. So where does the light from knowing come? And that comes from somewhere else. It is because it can be seen, it is not coming from there, it is coming from some other source. And that source we have to go towards.
Book 4, verse 20. Neither can it know two objects simultaneously, itself, its knowledge, content, and activity, and that which is external to itself, the divine fragment.
So knowledge of the divine fragment, right, is what we call in the Hindu Shastra, it is Swayambhu, right? So it is when attention absorbs in the source of attention, then comes knowledge of the source of attention. But as long as attention is falling on some knowledge, content, or activity, right, there, then that is external to the divine fragment, right? And we cannot know that also and know the divine fragment at the same time. Both cannot be known simultaneously. Right? Yeah, right. So that is what he's saying in this sutra. Yeah.
The mind is further convinced of such an impossibility as Book 4, verse 21. If knowledge of the mind by a remoter mind is postulated, an infinite number of knowers must be inferred and the sequence of memory patterns and reactions would tend to infinite confusion.
Right. So this is the where Mr. Tavaria's science differs a lot from Gurdjieff, because in Gurdjieff we start with something called self-observation. And in self-observation, in the initial stages, the very initial stages of self-observation, uh, one thought is observed by a higher thought. So there is no observing I in the beginning, right? There is just one higher thought observing a lower thought. So if knowledge of the mind by a remoter mind is postulated, but if in the end what he's saying, if one mind is observing another mind, then all minds are controlled by reactions and memory patterns, right? So what is the point? It is only going to lead to confusion. There must be something outside the mind which is observing the mind, right? But in a way, we can say that there's still that is a little, when we move on the path, when we start from ABC, it becomes a little practical in that sense. But what he's saying, that you just step outside the mind and you are able to see the workings of the mind. There is no need to go through that whole process.
What follows is very natural, but only possible at this stage of biological development, when mind has reached the stage shown in diagram 3A and is not due to any false religiosity.
Right. So diagram 3A is 5221, right? 5221 is established, uh, right, by diagram 3A. So, and it should not be due to any false religiosity. So I think on a few days ago when we were reading, I don't know how many of you were in the reading of psychological commentaries, where he says there is a, what do you call, uh,
Artificial conscience.
false conscience and a real conscience, right? So religion creates a false conscience within us, that this is right and this is wrong and this can be done, right? So even there can be a negative 5221. That is what he's trying to say. And so that 5221 should not come because of false religiosity, right? Then we are on the wrong path. But if 5221 comes through what you call the pause and understanding, then it is totally different.
Book 4, verse 26. The mind then tends towards discrimination and increasing illumination as to the true nature of the One Self, the divine fragment.
So as the mind calms down, right? And because of 5221 has come in from the beginning of 5221 starts with the introduction of a pause. So there are gaps in the process of the mind when you introduce the pause. And in those gaps, right, where attention falls back on its source. So there is, as those gaps increase, there is more and more illumination of that which is observing the mind rather than the process of the mind itself. And that which is observing the mind is the divine fragment.
Then, from this stage of development onwards, it proceeds to stage 3B and is guided properly to understand the true nature of the divine fragment as Ishvara, the transcendental teacher, the only worthy teacher.
So 3B is to be able to see, there is darshan without the interference of the mind. There is a direct knowing. It's what he calls as intuition, right? So in 3B, it's the stage of intuition, and there is a direct knowing. And in that, we see the true nature of things. And the true nature of everything is that everything is the divine fragment, right? So it is through that we are able to see this.
Stage 3B is mind's ultimate progress. It
Hmm.
cannot go beyond this stage and so willingly stops the myriad modifications, the thought forms, which create ripples or whirlpools, that is, various electromagnetic waves, in the thinking instrument.
Right. So this is very important in the sense that so we saw in what do you call in 3A, the Manas makes a thought form. That thought form goes to the registration area and it is what you call registered. In 3B, the thought form making process, that is, if Manas is making, say, 60 thought forms per second or 120 thought forms per second, that slows down considerably. So there are gaps in the process of making the thought form. And in that gap, the energy of the incoming impulse, it goes through the Brahmarandra and there is darshan of the divine center or the Ishwar, the divine fragment inside, right? But even then there is still a process of the manas making thought form. So there are these uh, myriad modifications, the thought forms which create ripples or whirlpools. Now this is very important that these create electromagnetic waves in the thinking instrument. So whenever there is a wave, there is a movement. There is a movement from up to down and from past to future, right? So that the brain itself, it cannot help it. It is because of the electromagnetic movement, it keeps oscillating in the past and future, right? And when these, he says, after 3B, these electromagnetic waves slow down. So there's nothing like past or future. There's a continuous, what do you call, sensitivity of now only after 3B.
In it is a stage of downward arc, Sohalo, fourth stage.
That's a fourth stage of Swaha in the downward arc.
Downward arc. And in the upward arc also same.
So it's a very high stage.
Very high stage, 3D.
Stage 3B is mind's ultimate progress. Oh, we've read this. We will go down.
Yeah, we
New
did that.
one. Now one slowly closes the major valve or block at taluka, the base of the rear brain, which for eternities had remained in open position. Mind must do this of its own volition and accord.
Right. So when he closes this valve, what he does, he allows one incoming impulse to remain inside. And then he closes the valve. That is, he does not allow new incoming impulses to come in. There is no meeting with memory patterns. There is no forming of thought form, nothing, right? And he just circulates that one impulse. And all the, what you call, noise of thought form making this thing, it ceases and he enters what he calls the silent area or deep silence, right? And he's able to hear what in Gurdjieff is called the higher centers or the whisper of the divine fragment. Right? It is not something we hear with this ear. It is a different ear with which we hear it. Right?
It is very interesting that he mentions that it should be like mind must do this of its own volition accord here. And also in the previous sentence, he says, willingly stops the myriad modifications. So there is a element of, willingly or of its own accord for the mind.
Yeah, right. Bhishma as Icha Mrityu. Right? The ego as Icha Mrityu. Right? Now the ego decides that it wants to get dissolved. It doesn't want to remain. And it is only then it is a voluntary action of the mind. When the mind was formed, there were three parts of the mind: one which throws light, one which says this is the experience. So to say this is the experience, the I was formed, the ego was formed. The ego has to, what you call, possess the experience to give it to the divine fragment. But in that moment when the divine fragment, in those vibrations, it went into a stupor, the ego and the divine fragment, that link broke off, and the ego said, I am now experiencing everything. And it was made because the ego, the divine fragment cannot directly experience. It needs the ego to take the experience and give it to him. And there the ego says, now I'm really willing to dissolve. He goes back to that moment where the divine fragment detached, what do you call, the Buddhi said, I don't want to listen to the divine fragment. I want to do things on my own. Right? That moment.
Gurudev, can I intervene? Sorry,
Yeah,
Pranam.
yeah,
I'd like to know that whisper of the divine fragment. It's not
mm,
in language form.
right.
What would that be like? Would you be able to give us some indication of what that
So
whisper would be
if
like?
you take his
Thank you.
science, Mr. Tavaria's science, he takes the energy of sensitivity right to the door of the divine fragment.
Mm.
Now, supposing I come to into a room where everyone is sitting, right? Before I can
Right.
think, I sense something is wrong.
Okay.
So that is the energy of sense. Then my mind tells me that this is wrong or that is wrong. I use my logic. But before the mind comes in, before logic comes in, there is the energy of sensitivity which tells me I just sense something is wrong. So there is a sensitivity of the guidance of the divine fragment. Right?
And that would be because the senses have been purified by that stage
It
already,
is the same
obviously.
energy which works through the senses, but it is now been refined to a very high stage.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
And when this is done, all the noise inside the mind ceases, and in deep silence it is able to hear the merest whisper of the divine fragment, Ishvara, the transcendental teacher.
The prodigal son comes home. The divine fragment says, "We have come home."
What follows now
Also, in
are
answer to your question, Sharmila, uh, there is to come to this stage, there is a big refinement of the emotional energy.
There
And
must be, yes.
so the emotional energy is free of all its attachments. Right? When
That's many
the
lifetimes, hey Gurudev?
pardon?
I said that must be many lifetimes, right?
Yeah, well, right. The thing is that when the emotional energy does not get attached, right, then it transforms into a kind of uh, seeing aspect. It becomes clairvoyant. So you have the energy of sensitivity, which is now at a higher grade, and the emotional energy, which is now it can see rather than attach.
Oh, wow. That is
And so
fabulous.
there is this what do you call where the higher opens up, and it is available to receive what comes from the higher.
Incredible. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But if we put it in very ordinary language, if we put it right, so uh, just if I was to ordinarily just fall in love with someone, right? So
Mhm.
even before that person wants a cup of tea, I sense she wants a cup of tea. Can you understand what I'm saying?
You're right.
So the emotional energy at that stage is free. It is a kind of love which is totally free of attachments. It is vibrating at that level, right? And it is then when these, what do you call this, communication with the higher at that moment.
It's beautiful. Thank
But
you.
without love, it is not possible. But not I love you and you love me, not that love. But it is the same energy, which is refined to a very high state.
I have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
Are there different levels of intuition? So, for example, uh, a person going into a room and perceiving what's happening, a mother knowing what's happening to her child, or maybe some a whisper from the divine fragment. Are they all the same level or different levels of intuition?
He has not divided, he has just, in 3B, he has just talked about intuition, right? But personally, I have divided intuition into three parts: inspiration, insight, and intuition. So to reach even that level of 3B, we pass through these stages that initially it is just a kind you're as if you're just inspired, something, a flashing, a small electric shock. right? Uh, then with that comes a kind of knowing, insight, and then there is a direct seeing, intuition. So I personally just what you call divided it into three parts, right? But he does not talk of those three parts.
And are all of these three, as per your definition, in 3B, or would they start from lower stages also?
So we'll have to take it from what do you call diagram 1, 2 to 3A to
Okay.
between. There's a process involved. I mean, he just jumps from diagram 2 to 3A, right? But for us, it could mean many lifetimes, right?
Thank you.
What follows now is Book 4, verse 32. The modifications of the mind stuff through the inherent nature of these three gunas come to an end, for they have served their purpose.
Yes. So there are three different screens of life. Sometimes we can say even four different screens of life. Or on one screen, I'm seeing the events of life, which are happening in front of the five senses. On the second screen, I'm seeing my inner reactions to those. That is the screen of the mind. So that in what you call yogic terms, we could call it as the physical screen or the screen of the senses as Bhut Akash, the screen of the mind as Chit Akash. And then there is where the divine fragment is observing the very Prakriti itself. And the most basic form of Prakriti is when she divides herself into the three gunas. So everything in life is nothing but a ratio of three gunas, right? So you say something, it is three gunas. I react to that, it is three gunas. Everything is a ratio of three gunas. So at that moment, then the divine fragment is observing the what do you call the dance of the three gunas, and they have served their purpose. They were there to give experience to him, right? He couldn't get the experience because the ego came in between. The ego is dissolved, and now the experience is coming directly to him, right? So uh, their purpose is done, and it is the nature, what you call Prakriti, becomes like a mirror. The divine fragment sees itself in the mirror. Shiva sees his form in Parvati, and they have served their purpose. Right.
All three gunas are in rhythm and balance. Is it so?
If they come into rhythm and balance, they become a mirror.
Hmm.
But if you want to enjoy the game, then don't let them come into full rhythm and balance.
But rhythm and balance. We don't know how much it will take time. But here it is rhythm and balance, right?
Right.
And sir, fourth screen?
So
Fourth
you go
screen
rhythm
would
and
be?
balance. Huh?
Fourth screen would be?
See, the
You said
problem is that in his cosmology, he has taken Mahakal first and universal divine mind later. You understand? So even after the gunas come into rhythm and balance, there is some form of memory or time called as Mahakal, because the universal divine mind or Prakriti is on this side of Mahakal. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? So still there is the what do you call the bandhan of time in that sense. Memory has not been destroyed; it has been bypassed, and so there is still something over there which we can conceive from his cosmology. From his cosmology.
Rajan, this is all in 3B stage or 3C stage, Rajan bhai?
Where he's saying 3 Sima, you go beyond 3B and there's total silence, right? He just told us.
Oh my God.
So the
First,
problem is that memory still remains. It is not the memory we are talking about, but the basic patterns which created memory, which must be lying in Maka.
Mhm.
First, we have to remember the idea and of the divine fragment entering existence, willingly accepting all the rules of the game of existence, acquiring minds, bodies, senses, and free will to be encased within these outer coverings, and
No,
agreeing to. Should I read again?
you
Okay.
encash a check. This is encased. It got encased in this thing. It got
Sorry,
encased.
did I read in cash?
Yeah, you encashed a check in the bank. I
Okay.
don't know whom you gave it to, but
Okay, I'll read again. First, we have to remember the idea and of the divine fragment entering existence, willingly accepting all the rules of the game of existence, acquiring minds, bodies, senses, and free will to be encased within these outer coverings, and agreeing to be completely ignored for eternities.
right. So in the Swahalok, in the electronic universe, the buddhi ignores the divine fragment. And the divine fragment, when it descends into what do you call, from Mahakal into Swaha, it goes into a kind of stupor for a single moment. And it has worn these clothes. It has been given three instruments called buddhi, aham, and what do you call, brain. Yeah? It has been given three instruments, and the aham part of the instrument, it takes over the throne, right? Because for that momentary fragment in time, it went into a stupor, and the king was changed, right? And the false I became the king, right? And then since then, the divine fragment has been ignored for eternities. It goes on and on.
This purpose is not fulfilled upon reaching Nadir.
Right. So this goes on till Nadir.
The other aspect and purpose to be properly understood also is that the divine fragment has now to unwind what has been wound around through all these eternities, to redeem entirely all degeneration caused to body, mind, and senses.
Right. So this is so important. This is so important that it has to redeem entirely all degeneration. Right. See, the divine fragment cannot become Nadir because the what do you call, the clothes which it wears, the body brain system which it wears, right? Because that the vibrations of that fall to Nadir, the divine fragment falls to Nadir. It gets an experience of Nadir. Now, how did it fall? What allowed it to fall to Nadir? So at some point in this, which huh?
Fourth stage of the Bhulok.
Fourth stage of Bhulok. Fourth stage of Bhulok, the divine fragment got stuck, and it had to fall to Nadir, but it could not fall to Nadir. Uh, it needed some push, it needed something, and at that point of time, and no other journey could progress unless, see, the idea was, the rule was that it has first to go to Nadir and then come to what do you call, uh, to start its upward journey. But it couldn't fall to Nadir because it was stuck at 10.4. So at 10.4, nature gave the what do you call, body brain system, uh, what we call as negative emotions, right? Those negative emotions were given as a bank loan. Maybe your what you said, encashing the check was right, right? It was given as a bank loan to the divine, what do you call, divine fragment, so that now if the body brain system indulges in negative emotions, it can fall to Nadir on, because the vibrations have to fall right down to a lower level. So and that was only possible through negative emotions. So negative emotions were given as a loan to the divine fragment. It fell down to Nadir. From Nadir, the body brain system by nature was taken and put again on 10.4, but what do you call, the negative emotions were not returned to nature. The loan which was taken to nature to fall down, right? Now at 10.4, if the divine fragment wants to make progress from 10.4a to 10.4a to 10.45 to 10.45, it first has to return all the negative emotions to nature. And this is where we understand where Gurdjieff says non-expression of negative emotions, because no journey can progress unless these negative emotions are returned to nature. And that is called redeeming. You give the loan back, redeem the loan. What you have taken to fall to Nadir, you redeem it and you give it back to nature. And that is a very long process. It is a very, very long process. Requires real hard work, because we keep on judging others, we keep on falling into jealousies, we keep on falling into reactions, we keep on, justifying ourselves, right? We keep on singing our song, how good we are, etc., etc. So till all that is redeemed, till all that is given back to nature, we can't progress further. Right? So through all these eternities, to redeem entirely all degeneration, so all the degeneration which was caused to the body, mind, and senses by falling down into it, what do you call this nadir, that has to be redeemed. Right? Now, in another way, we can say that what is mind? What is mind? So, mind is four centers: thinking, feeling, sensing, moving. Right? So, the mind degenerated. So, negative emotions is one part of it. What is the second part of it? The second part of it is that everything has become a confusion in the mind. Thinking takes the place of feeling, feeling takes the place of thinking, right? Moving takes the place of feeling, etc., etc., right? And all these functions of the mind, they have degenerated, right? The mind is full of wrong connections, wrong functions, everything. All that, first the negative emotions have to come back, and then the mind has to be repaired. The instrument which we are going to use to rise higher has to be repaired, right? And the energy of sensitivity which works in the senses has totally become the energy of sensitiveness. And that has to be what you call transformed from the energy of sensitiveness to sensitivity. So all this, when we come to 10.4, we wake up at 10.4, and suddenly we see that all this was taken as a loan, and that loan has to be redeemed, right? Only then can we progress further.
Rajan sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you explain again when you said mind is making wrong connections, like thinking is taking place of sensing and sensing moves? Can you explain
Who's
again?
asking?
This is Devjot.
Devjot.
Oh, just repeat your question. I didn't get it exactly.
I just wanted to understand what you last said about mind, which is making wrong connections, uh, switching thinking with sensing and sensing with thinking. And
Now, a simple thing, right? I'm thinking. So thinking is a process of the mind. But my leg is moving. If you see, many people's legs are also moving at the same time. Now, thinking is not an activity of the moving center, right? Right. So it is wrong working of the mind. Huh? Right. Or say I'm walking easily on the road, but suddenly I get a thought of excitement and I start walking very fast. So wrong connection of thinking with the moving center. Okay. Do you understand? Right? Now, somebody insults me, I react immediately. Wrong working of the emotional center. There I had to bring in the thinking center and think that what was the cause of him, what do you call, saying these words to me or treating me in this way, but immediately my emotional center reacts. So the whole working of the mind has become a wrong working. And that working has to be put in order, and it takes years and years of hard work to do this. So, first of all, we have to be free of negative emotions. And secondly, all the four workings of the mind have to be what you call cleaned and put in their proper order. Did you get it? I don't know.
Yes, sir, I got that. How would I know when I'm, let's say, making a wrong connection, which one is the right one? How do I, in that moment, how do I fix myself?
You don't fix yourself, nothing has to be fixed, right? It is the light of illumination fixes everything. Right. So when you observe that suddenly your thinking has changed from what you call ordinary thinking to excited thinking. You're excited about something, and suddenly you see that tension has come in your muscles and your hands and feet are moving. Suddenly you see that there's a wrong connection between the thinking center and the moving center. And the very seeing of that slowly changes everything. It takes years of self-observation to do this. It cannot be done overnight. There's no something, how do I know? There's something, the question is, how do I see? Not how do I know? Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Huh.
Saurabh, the
Uh,
question, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, when we jump from Nadir to 10.4 directly,
Right.
so is there any point or is there something that is prerequisite before I realize that there is something wrong in my life, there is something higher purpose of my life? So, is there some requisite that this many times of life I have to live? Then I realize that
Yeah, I don't
something is wrong.
understand the question. I don't understand the question exactly. Can you
Sir,
say it in Gujarati? I'll answer in English.
okay. જો આપણે નાદિરમાંથી 10.4 માં આવીએ છીએ અને
હા.
મને આ જન્મમાં રિયલાઇઝ થાય છે કે મારી લાઈફમાં કઈક તકલીફ છે, કઈક લોચા છે, કઈક પ્રોબ્લેમ છે અને મારી લાઈફનો કોઈ હાયર મીનિંગ છે. તો એની પહેલા જે લાઈફ હું જીવી ગયો છું, તો કોઈ પ્રી રિક્વિઝાઇટ ખરું એવું કે આટલા જન્મ અથવા આટલા વર્ષો સુધી હું અંધારામાં જીવીશ તો જ મને ખબર પડશે કે હા મારા લાઈફમાં કોઈ હાયર મીનિંગ છે?
ના, એવું exactly એવું નથી. It's not exactly like that. We'll take two things. In his notes, Mr. Tavaria says that in one lifetime, the divine fragment, it tries to whisper to us 3 times, right? And usually those whispers, or when it tries to tell us, it happens many times during a very important shock in our life, right? So maybe my girlfriend leaves me and I'm in deep shock, right? And at that time, if something from inside says that, what is the meaning of life, right? Is this the meaning of life? Find a new girlfriend and again she'll leave me and again I go into shock, right? And this happens in life. Okay? So, or maybe tomorrow I fall very ill and I suddenly see that this body is going to end at some time, and at that time the divine fragment whispers inside that what is the meaning of life? Is there anything more to the meaning of life than just taking care of the body, right? So the divine fragment whispers 3 times in our life, and that moment, if we awaken a little, then we try to look for a different meaning in life. We look for a different, what do you call, we look for a teaching. Is there something beyond life? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of birth and death, as he calls it? Why have we come, right? And usually the timing of those 3 whispers is where when there are some these kind of very important events in our life. Maybe somebody close to me dies, right? And at that moment, I'm in deep shock, right? And the divine fragment whispers, is there something beyond death? Can I understand something beyond death? And I listen to that whisper and I set out on a inner journey, which is not a journey, it is a quest, right? I set out on an inner journey to find out, are there any answers to these questions, right? So that is one way of looking at it. Uh, what do you call that? Three times in our lifetime, the divine fragment whispers, and we can listen to its whisper and we can awaken on a certain journey. Maybe we'll look for a teaching, maybe we'll look for a teacher, right? And try to understand what is the deeper significance of life. There is one way. There is also what do you call uh, there's a see the body brain system which has been given to the divine fragment, with which he is supposed to enjoy the three worlds of Bhu Bhuva Swaha. That body brain system, the whole psychological part of that body brain system is made of magnetism from the planets. It is made of planetary matter, right? So that planetary matter, it gets controlled by the what do you call uh, I won't say the word control is not a bad word, it's not a good word. It is influenced by the cycles of the planets, right? I don't know if you're understanding what I say, right? So it is influenced by the cycles of the planets. And so the planets at certain times, they come into certain combinations. So just like the divine fragment whispered to from within that what is the meaning of life, right? The planets at certain times come into certain combinations, especially Saturn, right? Where a shock is given in the mind and I wake up and I say, okay, what is the meaning of life, right? So the first point is that it can come through the whisper of the divine fragment. And the second is it can come due to a certain astrological cycle. And Mr. Tavaria has explained this cycle in his lectures, because everybody has a certain point in time where everything aligns at a certain astrological point. And that point is repeated so many times in one person's lifetime, right? So maybe if you say that Jupiter has a cycle of 12 or 13 years, then it is repeated. Or if you say Saturn has a cycle of 30 years, then it will maybe repeated. So there's a certain point in time when I woke up in 10.4. Can you understand? And that moment of awakening in 10.4 is astrologically repeated and repeated and repeated. And every time it is repeated, something from within tells me that, what am I doing over here? Now, if I ignore it, then I ignore it, right? But at that moment, if something awakens within me, then I look for a teaching. So there are two things. One is the divine fragment, but the divine fragment will whisper when certain, important, events come in my life, which give me a shock. So it will time those three whispers with that. And the second is that at a certain point where I see from Nadir, I was straight taken to 10.4. I woke up in 10.4. That point in time when I woke up has an astrological significance. It is just like when the child was conceived in the, uh, womb of the mother. That moment of conception has an astrological, or maybe the moment of birth has an astrological significance. Similarly, that moment in time when I woke up in 10.4 has an astrological significance. And that gets repeated due to the cycles of the planets, right? So that two things. Gurdjieff calls this the formation of the magnetic center. So the minute we ask that question, there is the beginning of what he calls the magnetic center. Suddenly now we are trying to take in influences which are beyond life, not life influences. This is what he divides influences into A, B, C. I don't want to go into that today, but right. So, but we are open to B influences, what he calls. From A influences, we are open to B influences, right? And that is that moment. The thing what Mr. Tavaria has written in his notes, that supposing we hear the divine fragment, right? And we realize, so that okay, and for even 1 or 2 months we may, make an effort, and then we go back to our old sleep and forget about it. Then he says that the divine fragment won't whisper again for another 2,500 years. So that is very important in that divine fragment, right?
રાજેશ, આવા સંજોગોમાં બહારથી પણ કોઈ મળી આવે ખરું? બહારથી પણ કોઈ ગાઈડ કરવા વાળું?
હા, પણ એ વખતે જે અંદરથી આવે છે એ ડિવાઇન ફ્રેગમેન્ટ નું આવે છે.
પણ because of the divine fragment whispered, the outside guidance મળી આવે એવું રાજનભાઈ?
The outer guidance we recognize because of the whisper of the divine fragment.
Before the acha.
You see, if you and you recognized and I did not recognize, right? Then both got the same impulse. Right? So that inner recognition that comes from the divine fragment.
Sir, suppose like what Saurav said that you hear the first whisper. What about the subsequent whispers? Will they also be a point in time where something more is being, in a way, like to come to us, or we need
No,
to take
if I don't hear the whisper, then it is okay.
No, but if I have heard the first whisper.
And then if I don't work upon it.
No, I worked upon it.
Then the subsequent way whispers, then I'm working towards a communication with the divine fragment. So that communication will filter in different ways.
Okay.
See, initially to pause my reactions, I find it so difficult. Then I'll find deeper and deeper meanings of the pause. And at that moment, I'll understand that this deeper meaning has not just come from my mind. Some grace has entered my mind. That is how I realize this deeper meaning. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? So there will be a continuous, I will say continual flow, what do we call, or continuous flow.
Rajan, every time we think of God, that is also a call from the divine fragment? Every time we think of God, is that also like a call? Like,
no, it could be mechanical also. There has to be, what do you call, an inner passion that why am I living life? What is the cause of life?
yes.
Yeah, if God is going to take care of everything, then I can just lead my ordinary, what you call, mechanical life. I have a whole group of friends, and there are more than 100 chats every day. Everybody's posting it. Their whole concept of what you call spirituality is that at the end of the year, you give something to God in the temple, right? Or you give something to charity, and that takes care of everything. So,
yeah.
Right. Okay, shall we read ahead? Yeah.
And further, that this whole process is not causation, punishment, karma, predestination, retribution, or God's will.
Right. This whole process of redemption is not karma, right? In that sense, but still it follows the law of repetition. It does follow the law of breath. So it is not causation. You have to just give back a loan, right? If you just give back a loan, it is not God's will. God's will is that we follow His will, but till we will first have to pay back our loan.
And so the most important purpose, the redeeming of body, mind, and senses, is now being fulfilled. For if mind is redeemed, then body, senses, and free will are automatically redeemed.
Wow. So it is a psychological redemption. It is not a physical. You can't go to the gym and redeem, right? Yeah, there's a psychological redemption. If there's a psychological redemption, then with that psychological redemption, the body is redeemed. So the body is breathing, so breathing is free. The body can see, so seeing is free. The body can eat, eating is free. All this has come to the body free of charge. But if you do a psychological redemption of giving back the negative emotions, right, then body and senses and free will are automatically redeemed. Very well put. Beautiful.
બી આમાં સાયકોલોજીકલ નું જરા સમજાવો.
Huh?
Meaning of psychological redeeming એને.
Meaning of psychological, એટલે the mind to degrade the mind, negative emotions were given to the mind, right? So the vibrations of the mind fell down to Nadir. So whenever we are in a negative emotion, we are in Nadir.
Right.
Right. So now that negative emotion which was given to fall down to Nadir, the mind gives it back. It becomes free of the negative emotion. It gives it back to nature. Right? That is redemption. In that redemption, senses and body are automatically what you call redeemed. This is what he's saying. You don't have to redeem the senses.
બરાબર.
No more is there any need of mind modifications. Of this, the mind is convinced.
Right. Modifications. This is now at that stage, modifications is of between universal mind and individual mind. So universal mind has a very, what do you call, specific nature, which is its own nature. But to become individual mind, it has to modify itself to hold a thought. In universal mind, there is no thinking. Right? There are no thoughts in universal mind. In individual mind, there is thinking, there is thought. But individual mind is universal mind, but universal has modified its nature so it can become a thought. It has modified its nature to become an emotion. It has modified its nature to become a sensitivity. It has modified its nature to become moving. So that original modification of the universal mind to allow itself to become individual mind, now that is no longer necessary, and that is the end of the game.
Can we also interpret it as?
Huh?
So when we were talking about that, impressions are coming in and they're coming to our prefrontal cortex and they are being refined by the chitta, and observation changes how these images are perceived and our reactions in process, right? So that is the modification of the mind, which is required if we are not in 3B. That conscious observation of the thoughts that are coming, and through observation, modification of those actions, when the actions become more emotions led than mind led.
So each modification will have a different, what do you call, level, and will have a different frequency. So the first modification is where incoming impulse meets identical memory pattern.
Right.
Right. Now, if we can pause there, then there is no modification. Then incoming impulse meets identical memory pattern. The second modification is the drawing of the, what do you call, thought form.
Right.
That thought form travels across the cortex and comes to the frontal brain.
Correct.
Where it meets the ISM center.
Yes.
Where it is decoded and put into language.
Right.
Right. So this is the third modification.
Right.
Out of that, so many of those decoded forms, they go out through this thing, and out of that we act upon certain, that is, we create thoughts out of certain this thing.
Correct.
So that is the fourth modification, right?
Yes.
And then out of that thought, I act upon that thought. It becomes my karma, right?
Correct.
That is the
Correct.
fifth modification. And
Right.
during the karma, halfway I'm getting angry on you, and I stop in between, then I've stopped at the sixth modification, if you want, right? So then I
Yes.
stop at the sixth modification, then I stop before the action, then I stop before the decoding is put into language, then I stop
Yeah.
at the moment of decoding, then I don't allow the thought form to be made, and then I hold one, what do you call, incoming impulse to keep myself alive, and I rotate it in 3B, 3C, right? So these are
So,
different stages of modification, right?
so isn't the entire process of all the 5, 6 modifications bypassed in 3B because there is direct witnessing?
There is no modification, just he
Yeah.
allows one, he holds one modification, and there is just then he in 3C he goes into silence, in 3B he is observing, witnessing.
Even the memory is also in deep freeze.
Yeah. And the memory he has put into deep freeze over here. He has bypassed the memories.
So there is no modification of the impulse.
Without memory, there can be no what you call modification. The identical
Modification.
memory pattern, there can be no modification.
Right.
Okay, you'll finish
Stage.
this sentence.
Okay. Stage. Stage 3B is now reached, and deep silence reigns within. And so comes peace, all enveloping inner peace.
Wow. I hope it comes. We are in a bad state right now. All we need this all enveloping inner peace. The world is in a real bad state.
Yes.
Right. Okay, any questions anyone wants to talk about anything? Okay. We meet next week. Yeah.
Rajen Vakil, Rita
Haji.
here. Rita. When you say that, just now you said there is only one impulse which is hold in this 3B stage.
It's in 3C state.
3C stage, yeah, 3C stage. But earlier we say that there is every second there are 30,000 impulses coming, and 10,000 are using for the upkeep of the memory and 10,000 for the upkeep of the body brain system. So what happens to those 20,000 which they are not coming now inside?
So those are coming inside. They are doing the thing. This is the 10,000 which become modifications.
Okay. So only those 10,000 which is entering the manas.
Yeah, modification. Yeah.
So only those 20,000 are there. They are usually used up and.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We meet next week. Thanks a lot. There's one question still. Yeah.
When are we going to continue Yoga Sutra?
The English one.
Actually, where things have become a little difficult for me is that I'm now talking 5 days a week. Right? Let me just for me adjusting to a 5-day week is a little difficult. Then I'll go back to the Yoga Sutra again after that. But that'll become a 6-day week. And then today somebody has messaged me, what do you call Mahabharata? So that'll become a 7-day week. So at present, just let me stick to a 5-day week, right? Then we'll talk about the Yoga Sutra. Yeah, I want to take the Yoga Sutra. I think we have to take Sutra 45 or 46, or 44 or 45, somewhere we have to take. Yeah,
I think this is the last few sutras left in the first chapter.
yeah, they're very, very deep, very interesting, and I really want to take them, want to work upon them. But let's see. This 5-day week has upset my whole, what do you call, inner psychology and everything. So. So give me some time to adjust, right?
That's why you take psychological.
Sir, what your intuition is saying about this war that is happening around?
I don't know the way things are going. It's very difficult to say anything, but definitely some different forces are at work. I mean, everybody else is just a puppet on the international stage. right? And I think that somewhere as a whole man has fallen into a lot of negativity, and what you call nature has just brought this shock that wake up, otherwise you're going to destroy everything, right? So everybody else is just a puppet. I mean, whatever they're doing, they're playing their part in the game or whatever. But I think that people with today's advent of technology and so many what do you call modes of excitement and entertainment, that man has forgotten his spiritual purpose, right? And maybe there is some nature is trying to give us a shock.
Sir, we already had one big shock in the COVID times, but
Okay.
us, we don't have learned our lesson. So we are getting ready for another shock.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Best thing is to sit in silence for a few minutes every day and just hold the empty space and allow the higher to descend. So once it descends, even in your small individual mind, it is not a descent in the individual mind. It is a descent in from universal mind. So, chalo, we meet next week. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next
Thank
Tuesday,
you.
right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.